Even as the world struggles to recover from the brutal shock of COVID-19 and the global response to it, for some sectors and companies, the experience has provided strong tailwinds. Tailwinds that have helped consolidate leadership positions and change trajectories of growth and success. In the media world, digital streaming has dominated viewing habits, popular imagination, and the cultural zeitgeist. Sitting pretty at the top is Netflix. As of June, Netflix had nearly 193 million subscribers, just over 10 million added between April and June. Its second quarter revenues came in at a little over $6 billion. If Orange is the new black, then Netflix may be the new Disney, having overtaken the legacy media giant in market cap a few times. The magic mantra for this success is out in a new book by Netflix founder and co-CEO Reed Hastings. He joins us now. Reed Hastings, good to see you. Thank you for making time.
A great pleasure. Thank you.
So what has been the trigger for this book, given that it adds historic and academic context as well as anecdotal experience to a Netflix culture deck that you made public a few years ago?
You know, the Netflix story over the last 20 years is quite remarkable. All the different evolutions from DVD by post to beginning and streaming, to producing our own content like Sacred Games and Stranger Things. And we wanted to put together the lessons that we've learned. And our book, No Rules Rules, comes out in India in a week. And we're so excited to share those ideas with other organizations about how to organize around employee freedom.
How much does the timing have to do with the fact that you are now, the leader, the legacy player in this new business or this new industry or offshoot of the media industry, and you have everybody between tech companies and legacy media companies trying to catch up? Is it also marketing and reaching out to prospective talent embedded in the reason for this book at this time?
Well, you know, the real leader is still YouTube. They're way ahead of us. But we continue to do amazing entertainment, all kinds of new movies and shows. And yes, 3 years ago, when we started the book, we were thinking when it came out, you know, it would help really spread the message that there's something kind of special on the Netflix service. And you can see that again in all of our content.
So let's look at the key rules that you've thrown up in this book. If you were just to do a broad outline or sort of break up this freedom and responsibility outlook that you have put forward as the bedrock of the Netflix culture.
You know, when you start with a small company, you tend to give employees a lot of freedom because you've hand selected those employees. And then as most organizations grow, they put rules in place, and that's to protect the company, but it also limits innovation and freedom. And we've come up with a different paradigm where there's no rules, where as we grow, and now we're about 8,000 employees around the world, we continue to have, very, very few rules. And we want to inspire people instead of manage them. We want people, our employees, to embrace what they're doing and to be creative in figuring out how to serve our members better.
So when you talk about hiring the best talent, to quote you, stunning colleagues, the job of a good leader is to have stunning colleagues, to weed out ordinary, average, just adequate performers. Does that, while I can understand this density of talent idea that you have built Netflix on, does that also seem, scary, discriminatory even to people in general?
Well, you know, if you think about professional sports like cricket or football, you're only going to win a championship if you've got amazing talent in every position. And so what we want to do is be more like sports. We say we're a team, not a family. And so we're very clear about this, that we want to be a championship sports team for entertaining people. And we really look at ourselves in that way. And again, a coach on a football or cricket team they also want great players in every position.
So, when we are living through the times that we are, where COVID-19 and this pandemic has sort of taken a wrecking ball and destroyed the global economy and life as we know it, does that help Netflix keep people not have to go through the painful process of downsizing and laying off or furloughing, which is what a lot of companies have done around the world, whether it's in the entertainment and media sector or otherwise?
Yeah, compared to airlines, we've continued to have many people, watching Netflix. We haven't needed to do any furloughs. So we're very fortunate because during a lockdown, people want an escape. They want to, fantasize and see some great shows. And Netflix is great for that.
While obviously the COVID-19 experience has been very different for Netflix and streaming services as opposed to other companies in other sectors, in in other situations, would this talent density approach keep the keepers list, hanging on to the best talent in the market, trying to pay above market rate? Would that help prevent downsizing and layoffs in normal times when other companies would be facing headwinds?
Yeah, absolutely. Eventually, we'll have a COVID vaccine and COVID will be over. And we'll continue to try to want a championship team to provide people entertainment that rivals everything they've ever seen. And it's incredibly stimulating and very affordable. So our focus on championship winning team will continue post-COVID.
Right. You know, you've also talked about this regular, relentless, on the spot feedback process that is encouraged. How do you ensure, or how have you ensured all these years that it doesn't become a roadblock, doesn't create a big organizational logjam or gridlock where people, just say what they want when they want and interrupt the natural flow of things, based on some of the anecdotes that have been shared in the book?
In the ideal state, all of your colleagues are giving you productive, constructive feedback, and you're getting better because of it. So again, if you come back to the sports team metaphor, it's so important that there's great teamwork between all the players in our team, between the different groups creating content, between marketing, on finance. And again, we create an environment where it's comfortable for them all to give each other helpful feedback.
Could you talk a little bit about how freedom and responsibility was adapted? How did you seed it in India? Was it quick to seed? Did it take time? Were there cultural tweaks that needed to be made?
Our Indian employees are just so into business culture. They're so entrepreneurial. I mean, it's just been incredible. And they've leaned into the Netflix culture to a wonderful degree. So I think it's worked very well for us.
But were there tweaks that had to be made at some point? Is there any anecdotal experience that you could share, given that India socially is so different, so stratified, so hierarchical, given that corporate culture in India is top-down, authoritarian for the most part, for the large part?
There is a societal context that's relatively hierarchical, but what we have found is because we attract the employees who want freedom, who want to be able to talk to each other, who want power, and our employees have a lot of power to make decisions without checking with other people. And that's worked quite well for us, because I think we're able to hire those Indian leaders who want to work in that very cooperative way.
You talked about the fact that the pandemic experience has been different for Netflix and for media companies, especially streaming services, because you've had a captive audience in a sense. Is there anything that leaps out at you in terms of the kind of behavior people exhibited? What kind of insights have you mined from the kind of viewing patterns that were exhibited during this time?
We were fortunate to be growing before COVID. We've been growing during COVID. I would say there's a little more of an escapist orientation, in the content. Like Tiger King was a big success that we didn't particularly expect, which is a docudrama, about a very interesting set of characters. Whereas another series, Indian Matchmaking, we always thought would be big and fascinating. That's been big all over the world. So that's a great example of how cultures are shared.
Right. In terms of the time spent, in terms of sampling, let's say, be more diverse content, did you see a little bit of that?
Yeah, the big thing we've seen is just more growth. Over this year, we've grown from roughly 170 million to 195 million in the first 6 months of the year. So that's faster than we've been growing before. Because again, there's less sports, or none in many cases. So people are turning to streaming as a way to pass the time and as a way to feel things, since they're, relatively sterile and locked up.
Despite the sort of fabulous growth that you've experienced in the last quarter, in the second quarter of the year, and up to the first 6 months of this year, the forecast for the next quarter, the coming months, seems to be, quite substantially reduced in terms of net subscriber additions. Do you see that like as a natural sort of tapering off because of normal life and a life that's not locked to the screen coming back?
Yeah, for the year, we'll have a record year, we expect. But you're right, this quarter will be slower than normal. Again, it's people coming back, at least in many countries, and being able to move around a little bit more, and sport coming back.
You mentioned sports in India, where you have Disney Plus Hotstar, you have Amazon Prime, and you have a lot of different players. Disney Plus Hotstar was, sort of took off when it was Hotstar in its original avatar, because of the sports content that Star had in India. Do you see yourself having to invest in sports or some kind of gaming content at some point, especially in these markets?
We're really going to focus on series and films. There's so much we want to do in those spaces. And as you said, Star's done great with IPL, and I'm sure we'll continue to do well with that. And we want to be the home of amazing series and films from all over the world.
I just mentioned the competition, especially in a country like India. Do you think at some point people like us, subscribers, will start reviewing how many streaming services they can subscribe to? And when that happens, what do you see giving Netflix the edge, the user experience and the product part of it, or the content? Because everybody's spending, trying to innovate on content and spending big bucks on acquiring the best content.
Yeah, there are so much competition between YouTube and Amazon Prime and Hotstar plus Disney and many others that are, starting. So it's a very competitive world. And what we're focused on is the product and having the choices and them be so great. And then also the content. And, we're just building the content more and more every year. But again, people will subscribe to multiple services because they're, all quite inexpensive, and they provide great value for people in their home to be able to watch, first run movies and incredible series.
You've also resolutely held out against advertising. In fact, when you were here last time, I remember in a conversation with you, you were very unequivocal about the fact that you really did not want to see advertising, as a company, as a team on the Netflix service. And yet again, I sort of hark back to the Indian market and similar markets around the world where competitors do have ad-supported plans which are cheaper. Do you see that becoming a commercial necessity at some point? Is that becoming something that you need to start thinking about, or can you afford not to? In which case, Netflix remains a premium service.
Well, in general, companies that imitate their competition have a very hard time. And we don't want to do that. We're not trying to imitate other companies that, as you said, do have advertising commercial interruptions. So we want to be a very affordable service that has no commercial interruptions. You just get to enjoy the service. There's no data issues. It's a much simpler business in that way. And then we get to focus on our members and just doing the absolute best shows and films that we can.
You know, I was just going to refer to the fact that downloads is something that was a function that was enabled after research in India and some other markets. Similarly, the mobile only plan, which is why I was wondering if India would make Reed Hastings and Netflix rethink this bit of their plan, of your strategy.
Well, it's great that the mobile phones are, in such broad use in India. And, people like to watch some content on their mobile phones, which is great. And as you said, because of India, we've learned so much about networks and phone-based entertainment. And those are lessons then that we're able to share with the rest of the world, like downloading, as you mentioned, which we really pioneered, or our Indian membership really taught us about.
Tech and legacy media companies are both trying to play catch up. You know the names better than I do. Who do you look at more seriously when it comes to, who do you consider more seriously as a challenge? Where do you see the big challenge coming from?
Well, as you said, there's Amazon Prime, Netflix, YouTube. Disney's been very effective with Hotstar. There'll be a lot of new things that come also. So it's just a very vibrant sector. And that's so exciting for the storytellers in India that they can go to many different companies to try to get their story produced. They have many options. So it's really opening up the storytelling both in India and around the world.
I'm going to have to do a follow-up. Is it the tech companies that worry you more, or is it the legacy media companies that worry you more?
It's a good question. If you call YouTube and Amazon tech companies, they're very formidable. But the media companies, are really in this. They've been in entertainment for 50 to 100 years. They're going to be in entertainment for another 50 to 100 years. So you probably have to give them the edge.
When you look at legacy media companies and you look at Netflix's growth in less than 25 years, where you've reached and what you've achieved, and you talk about, and you look at news headlines which say, oh, the Netflix market cap is they overtaken Disney's, even if it's for brief amounts of periods of time. How do you feel? What is it that you feel personally when you look at the Netflix success? And especially since you've done this book, you've gone down memory lane, you've had flashbacks. What does this success of Netflix mean for you personally?
Well, it feels like a good start. The internet is growing all over the world, and eventually we want to be able to entertain the whole world along with other companies, and to be a voice for connecting people, for helping them understand others, both in their society and in other societies. Entertainment can just bring so much joy to people and connect them in all kinds of great ways.
We are familiar with the Netflix story and we are familiar with the blockbuster story. 22 years on, how do you ensure that the rug is not pulled out from under your feet? And where are you looking at in terms of the possible disruptions that could happen to your business?
The rug will be pulled out from under our feet. It happens to all companies. There are almost no companies over 100 years old. So it's just a matter of time. But the way we forestall it is to continue to innovate and be so focused on our members, and just to do incredible series and films that people get such enjoyment from.
What do you see as the purpose of Netflix in this day and age? Because COVID-19 has made a lot of people, a lot of companies, a lot of countries, systems evaluate purpose very closely. What has the COVID-19 experience left you thinking about purpose?
We're really focused on entertaining the world, and the tragedy of COVID-19 has made it all the more clear how important entertainment is. In good times and in bad, people want to be able to escape and just enjoy life a little bit, and to connect with their friends, with their colleagues, and with other peoples.
We are talking at a time where the global economy is devastated. People's lives have been changed irrevocably. Do you see any fundamental shifts in the way we live life, in the way human beings relate to each other in society? We're also, of course, talking about not just COVID-19, but the Black Lives Matter movement a few years ago, 2 years, 3 years ago, the Me Too movement. So there's a lot of tumult in society, which now COVID-19 and the medical, the pandemic has exacerbated. How do you see all of this in the context of Netflix as a private company and its purpose?
You know, COVID-19 is an incredible tragedy, about 100 years after the 1918 flu. And if you look back, nothing really changed after the 1918 flu. It was a tragedy, but then it was over. And I expect once we have a vaccine and COVID goes away, hopefully next year, we're all going to go back to the bars. We're going to go back to the movie theaters. We're going to go back to the sports stadiums. And we're going to feel a great relief that the scientists of the world were able to create a vaccine so quickly to this terrible virus.
I guess we're totally out of time. Thank you very much for joining us, Reed Hastings. We wish you and the entire team at Netflix all the very best. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in. Do look out for another conversation on the Media Dialogues on CNBC TV 18 next week.